empowering the blind to be excellent, do more, and live with greater success. This show is for you and about you. Welcome to the Delivering Access Podcast.
Welcome back, Delivering Access Podcast listeners. I am simply pleased to welcome my guest, Mrs. Deborah Kendrick. Deborah, are you prepared to empower?
Absolutely.
Great. So we're going to dive right into the interview. We're very, very nosy here in Delivering Access Land, so we're not going to start with just one question. We're going to give you a barrage of 3 questions right off the bat. And so we'll start with a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, question 1, how you became blind, and some of the tools that you've used along your way.
Well, that's pretty easy. I was born and grew up in Toledo, Ohio, and I get a big kick out of saying, you know, I shook the dust from my feet of that town as soon as I was able.
Okay.
I became blind shortly before beginning school. I was 5 years old. I had a rare childhood retinal cancer called retinoblastoma. I lost the sight in my first eye in infancy, and then had extensive radiation treatments when they discovered cancer in the second eye at age 4 or 5. I don't remember very much about all of that. What I remember is how much I hated being in the hospital and how I celebrated when they told me I was finally going home. I tell children today, I do a lot of school programs, and when I tell children about my losing my sight, I say, you know, I've been in the hospital with all of my kids, and it's a lot of fun now. You know, there's a playroom, there's a lot of cool toys and things to do. But when I was a kid, it was really a yucky place to be. And my parents didn't stay all night or any of that stuff like I have done with my children. And so one fact that I just love is that I discovered sometime in the last 5 to 10 years, doing some research about my childhood, I discovered that I was released from the hospital on the 4th of July, which I think is really fine. So it was my Independence Day. And, you know, a big family story is that, of course, when I went home, I went into the hospital as a child who could see, and when I went home, I was a child who was blind. And it was a big dramatic moment. My father drawing the short straw, being the one to tell me. And my response was, and I do remember this very clearly, my father sitting on the bed, and the lunch tray was there. I got to eat lunch before I went home. Mm-hmm. He was holding my hand, and he said, you're going to take the bandages off, and we're going to go home today. When I take the bandages off, you're not going to be able to see. And I picked up a glass of milk, and I said, hey, you know what? I have figured out that I know how much milk is in this glass. You want to know how? It's cold right up to there. And I love that story, and I love the memory, and I loved hearing my father tell me after finding him. We were separated for decades, and he retold that story because the glass was more than half full, and I like to think of that as a metaphor for my life. Tools that I have used. Numero uno is Braille. I went to school shortly after becoming blind and learned to read Braille immediately in a public school in Toledo. I like to think I was wired to read. Whatever the reading medium would have been, that would have been for me, because that's just the way my brain was made, was to be drawn to words. So I was a very rapid learner in Braille. I was very quickly the best reader in first grade, and that was in the classes. So that was pretty cool. You know, we had the bluebirds.
Okay.
The bluebirds and the redbirds, and the bluebirds were the hot shots. And when I flew up to the top of the bluebirds, I knew I was in a good place. It has continued to be the centerpiece tool of everything I've been able to do. Of course, technology has played a huge part in my life for the last 25 years, I guess. And all of it has been, in one way or another, connected to Braille. And so, because of reading Braille, I knew at a very young age, 7 or 8, that when I grew up, I wanted to be a writer. So.
Okay. Well, even though me as the host fumbled over the question, you definitely nailed it. So that's great. Deborah, we're going to pivot just a bit and move into your desires for the blind. What's your passion for the blind community?
First and foremost, that literacy remain key. Because Braille has made such a difference in my own life, I recognize it as the key to literacy for people who cannot use print effectively. And I do worry sometimes about the shaky ground we stand on as blind people with other kinds of technological tools. I think if we continue to cling to literacy, to demand Braille for our blind children and our newly blind adults, the other things that matter most will follow. And for anyone to have a satisfying and productive life, you need work. I think Freud said, you need work and you need love. And in order to work, you need to be able to read, whatever the job. And we all know employment is a huge problem for blind people. But those who do work, statistics have shown that 85 to 90% of those who are employed are using Braille. So that's pretty significant. So I think literacy leads to work. And however you define love, you certainly need to communicate. So, so I think it all comes back to literacy.
All right. Well, great answer. And yeah, love and work. If I could just have those two things, I guess never mind the food and, you know, all of that, sunshine and a little water, but okay, I'll go with love and work. So I'm almost afraid to ask this question because I know some of the answer with your myriad of Braille displays that you have and being a Braille lover. But what mainstream and assistive technologies are you using each day?
Well, I use a Windows 7 based computer. I am never one of the first adopters of anything new. And that is because I love technology. I've been immersed in technology since its introduction to blind people. But I'm a user of technology more than a dazzled geek kind of person. I love technology for what it does for me. Mm-hmm. I love it because it enables me to access information and to manipulate information and to communicate. I don't love it because of whatever the latest bells and whistles are. So I always hang back. I came kicking and screaming into Windows, And with each version of Windows, I'm slow. I managed to avoid Vista altogether, thank God.
You wasn't that slow. It just went past very, very fast as Windows realized their mistakes. Wait, go ahead.
That's right. I just hung in there because you're right. It had sort of a short life, and I thought I missed that one. And I have not missed exposure. I have had to teach a couple people using Vista, much to my dismay. But so currently, I'm using Windows 7. I have no desire to move forward to Windows 8 unless it becomes necessary for some reason. And well, you asked about mainstream, so that's where the mainstream is, and Office 2010 and Internet Explorer, sometimes Firefox. So being this slow adopter, when the iPhone was first on the scene as an accessible out-of-the-box product, I remember being at one of the conferences and a blind friend showing me, who's a major geek. He's one of those people who always has to see everything the minute it's new and use it right away. So I just thought, well, that's nice for him. You know, he was, swiping all over the place on this touch screen, and I took it and held it and thought, I don't get it. I don't want to do that.
Wow.
Of course, time went on, and I started seeing more and more people, and I'm insatiably curious. That's really an inescapable element for any writer, is that I just am insatiably curious. Sometimes my close friends will say when I meet someone new, be careful, she'll be interviewing you.
Right. I've experienced that, Deborah, but I'm not going to agree with them. I'll go with whatever you think.
So eventually I got an iPhone, and like everyone else, I love my iPhone. I do warn people, when I got the iPhone 4 was March of 2011, and I protected myself by maintaining an additional mobile phone line with my previous phone. It was an LG phone, so that I wouldn't have a stressful situation where I absolutely had to call someone and didn't know how to use this iPhone yet. And I recommend that to people. I only did it for a month, but it made the transition much less stressful. But I can't even list the number of things I do with my iPhone these days. And it's so wonderful to have one device. If you're stuck anywhere, you're never really stuck, because, if you're waiting for a ride or someone is late for a meeting or an appointment, if you've got your iPhone, you've got books to read or radio stations to listen to or email to check. And it's just such a fabulous tool.
How many apps do you have on your iPhone?
Other people always say the number. I have no clue.
How many pages?
Well, I have 4 pages, but I have several folders.
Okay. Because I noticed you didn't name different apps outside of the standard, so I hope you wasn't one of the people who had their iPhone for 2 years and they got 4 apps in total.
No way.
Okay.
No way. No, I have several folders, and sometimes, the only I'll think to myself, like I'm looking around for one particular app and I can't find it. And then I find it in social, and I think,
right away, exactly.
Social, or it's in news, or I have one called Access Tech. Now, the ones in Access Tech do make sense, because although I haven't put them all in there, but I have Omobi and VizWiz and TapTapC and the Money Reader and Light Detector. I'm totally blind, and I love the Light Detector. Once I'm on the board for the local blindness rehabilitation agency. I went there for a committee meeting one day, and I was in the conference room where I thought we were going to meet, and I'm waiting. No one's coming, and I don't care. Like I said, I've got my iPhone, right? So I'm listening to the NPR and I'm checking my email and everything, and still nobody's coming. And I don't know what made me do it, but I opened the light detector app. Lo and behold, I'm sitting in a dark room.
Wow.
And right at that moment, one of the staff looked in and she said, "Deborah, there you are. We're not meeting in here."
Wow.
It's kind of cool because, the light detector clued me in before I was found.
Yeah, definitely. So, briefly, tell us about all your Braille displays.
Well, it sounds, like I have this really opulent lifestyle, and I don't. But I'm a person who never wears anything out. I never break anything. I take really good care of things, technology and otherwise. So I have a Braille Note Classic, which I rarely use anymore because it is older technology, but I do sometimes use it for reading books. And then I have a Braille Note PK, which is also older technology at this point and is the first one ever it is basically wearing out. The Braille display is getting kind of mushy, but I have the Oxford Dictionary on it that Humanware offers, and I love that so much that I still use the PK daily for the dictionary because it's so quick. With my computer, I'm using a Brilliant 32, a Brilliant BI 32, and I also have, though, my older Braille Connect, which and I said 32, it's 40. And my Braille Connect is 40 cells also. And I sometimes carry that with me and pair it with my netbook when I'm traveling. The newest Braille aware device that I'm using, what I use the most are the Braille display connected to my computer, and that would be the Brilliant from Humanware, and then my note taker personal organizer, which is a Braille Sense Plus from HIMS. And with that device, you can use voice. All of the note takers, really, from all of the leading companies, have synthesized speech incorporated, which is nice, so you can listen as well as read Braille. I probably have the speech on about 10% of the time. If I'm setting something new up that I haven't done before, the speech is useful, but simply for reading, I tend to just use the Braille display. And I have paired a few of these devices with my iPhone and my iPad, incidentally, which is very nice. I haven't, now I know that the Brilliant Braille display pairs very nicely with the iOS devices, and I have not done that, but I have paired the Braille Sense with my iPhone, and I use that quite a lot. It's really nice to go in and out of the terminal mode and use the iPhone to send texts or read emails. It's sometimes a little bit faster, or maybe quite a bit faster, than using the touch screen to do that. And as everyone knows who uses Braille and uses the Apple products, there are some drawbacks to using grade 2 Braille with these products, and that's Apple's doing, not the doing of any of the Braille device manufacturers.
Sounds like we need to advocate.
I think so, and I think, some people are trying to do that. There are a variety of small things that can be really annoying. If you're writing in grade 2 Braille and you hesitate, it immediately translates any letter or character that you've just done, it expands it into whatever its grade 2 equivalent.
Right.
You can, and if you don't reread what you've written, which a lot of us don't, you know,
because we know that we typed it correctly. We're not knowing that this imposter in the background is changing it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Deborah, you didn't read the show notes that I sent, so you don't know what time it is right now, but just ask me, what time is it?
What time is it, Bashan?
It's my favorite part of the interview, the thunder moment. And so the thunder moment is where I ask you rapid fire questions and you come back with mind-blowing, brief, and to the point results. Sounds like a plan?
I'm game.
All right. So as you know, being blind is almost like a roller coaster, and sometimes we have our ups and we have our downs. Give us a short story of, you know, a time that you were feeling down and you know it was directly related to your blindness.
Oh, I should have read the show notes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll give you an example from a really long time ago.
That helps.
Okay. When I applied for a teaching assistantship at Kent State University in the English department, I was immediately accepted, and then I received another letter that I was unaccepted. And that was because I had not indicated in my application that I was blind, and once I was accepted, I did indicate that I was blind. And my response to it was not to get mad, but to get tough. I knew I was good and I knew I belonged there. And I simply wrote another very impassioned letter that I'd been accepted on the basis of my transcripts and my writing samples and my recommendation letters from professors, and that I knew I could do the job, because a teaching assistantship involves teaching classes as well as taking classes and getting, you know, your tuition paid and a stipend to live on. And that I knew I could do the work and had no doubts. And if I was wrong, I would leave after 1 quarter. And I got a call from the chair of the department, and I was in. And the rest, as they say, is history.
All right. I can see how that could be a downer, but you definitely changed it into a positive, which is great. Tell us about a time where you were blind, which has been the majority of your life, and it was just the best time you have absolutely ever had.
Because of blindness?
Not necessarily because of blindness, just you're blind now, so we can't change that necessarily. So just tell us the best time you've had, whether it was with family and friends, or, you know, where blindness wasn't an obstacle. It was, I am free as a bird, you know, a blue bird, because, you know.
Oh my goodness, there are so many. There's so many.
Share just one.
Okay, just one. I would have to say, being a mom, raising my children. My children are all grown up now. And when I have talked to many other moms who are blind, who contemplated parenthood, researched it, thought about it. I say, well, I guess I wasn't smart enough to do that. I always knew I was going to be a mommy, just like I always knew I was going to be a writer. We'd been married for about 3 years when our first baby came along, and it didn't occur to me to do any research pertaining to blindness per se. And then I realized, oh, I do need to learn how to do a whole lot of things here. And I think I had a moment in the hospital, as every young mother who is sane does, where you're holding this baby and you think, oh my gosh, what have I done? Oh, this is a bigger project than I am. But but it's because it is an awesome experience. But once I kind of got my ducks in a row and learned what I needed to do, and my answer to learning anything new, by the way, has been books. I just loaded up on books on child. And if I do say so myself, I was a great mom. And so because I have a daughter now who has 2 babies, and she says all the time she hopes she can give them the same kind of childhood that she and her siblings had. So I think that was that whole era, raising them and being such a part of their lives, was one of my most treasured episodes.
Wow, excellent. So, of the innovations and developments in the blindness community, what's exciting you the most?
Right now, I think some of the things that are beginning to tap into other senses, there's some work being done in a variety of places involving haptics, where you incorporate tactile and audio perceptions. And I think we have a long way to go, but it's some of the innovations and projects that I've read just a little bit about are so exciting. Probably the example that got the most publicity was the NFB participation in driving a car blind at Daytona Beach.
Were you there?
I was not there.
I was, and it was awesome.
You are so lucky.
Yeah.
I was there in spirit, though. And, you know, I mean, that's an example of using the other senses to see. And I think, to me, that's the most exciting. And that's just one example. Steve Landau of Touch Graphics and Josh Mealy of Smith Kettlewell Institute are working on some really cool things where you have a tactile image under your hands, or even a 3D image, and you touch it at various points, and you get audio feedback with more detailed information. And I just see a lot of potential in this stuff. So I think that's the most exciting, because it's the newest and the most almost science fiction oriented, but it's
that's those books you've been reading, Deborah.
Right.
So there is, and I hear the passion in your voice, there is a blind person out there who is struggling to cope with their blindness, and they call you up as a last result. What would you tell them to empower them to push through that time period in their life?
I think the first thing I would say is you are still you, and no disability is going to change that. So if you're smart, you're going to be smarter. And if you're brave, you're going to be braver. And if you're fearful, you're going to be more so, but you need to get around it. I think that's probably the biggest fear that people have when they lose sight or lose hearing or lose the ability to walk or anything else, is that they're not going to be the same person anymore. And of course, we always are. Mm-hmm. So that would be first. And then I'd probably say the learning curve is maybe going to be steep, but you need to immerse yourself in learning new techniques. Everything you've been able to do before, you can do again, but you'll have to use a different approach.
Wow. Right. So you didn't read the show notes again, so you have to ask me, what time is it?
What time is it, Vashon?
It is time for us to say goodbye. But In our traditional closing, what we ask you to do is give us one parting piece of advice, tell us how we can reach you, and then we'll say goodbye.
All right. Well, one parting piece of advice, I would say never stop moving forward. Or no, let me put that another way, because I'm not fond of negatives. I would say, please always continue moving forward. How to contact me? We didn't talk about my work, but you can visit much of the writing that I do by going to AccessWorld at www.afb.org/AW, or my column in the Columbus Dispatch at www.dispatch.com, or send me an email at dkkendrick, DKKENDRICK @earthlink.net.
And now we'll say goodbye.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been fun.
This has absolutely been fun, and I'd like to give a great thanks to Aaron Linkson, our podcast producer and sound engineer, Deborah Kendrick, who's been our honored guest for today. Goodbye for now.
In my traditional closing, if you think you can, or if you think you can't, you are right. Think pennies, get pennies. Think dollars, get dollars. See you on the other side.
This has been a Yucca Music Group production. Website 81x.com/Yucca/X. The Yucca Music Group can be reached at 678-608-8969. All rights reserved.